Hey guys, Ron here. Well, once again, I shouldn't say once again, but what a weird season. It's April. I'm in Southern California, and I'm wearing a sweatshirt and a leather jacket. It's really cold. I can't wait for this winter to end. Then again, here at the beach in the marina, we had a day last September, I believe, that was 99 or 100 degrees. So, yes, it appears there is some form of climate change happening, and I don't like it. I don't know whether it's man-made or it's natural, because climate has been cyclical through the decades and eons, through the centuries. But whatever it is, I don't like it. And it's cold tonight, and it's April, and this should stop. It should be spring. I think it is spring. Anyway, guys, tonight I'm going to talk about a subject that I've touched on before, but um, I just want to do some more digging, and I'll go over the background, and then at the end, or before the end, I'll give you my analysis and my opinion on the subject. And the subject tonight is, why do people think, some people think, to this day, that Elvis faked his death and lived out the rest of his years, or is still alive? It's conceivable. Be pretty old, in his 90s. So let's talk about that. Okay. So first we got to start with some background, and I'm going to say that the theory that, I don't know, I guess probably thousands of people, maybe more, around the United States and the world, the theory that Elvis faked his death was not made of whole cloth. I mean, it really probably started in earnest when Gail Brewer Giorgio wrote two books. One was called Is Elvis Alive? And then another one was The Elvis Files. And yes, I have them both. Why? Because I was interested in the theory. And she gained a lot of attention in the early 90s, and Geraldo Rivera ripped her to shreds on his show. He was extremely condescending and nasty. He wouldn't even consider her point of view, even if it was simply a quote-unquote conspiracy theory. A lot of the fans and family members think it's hurtful, and I understand that, but and other people think that fans of Elvis are just, the delusion is so strong that they wanted him to be alive for so badly that they concocted this theory that somehow he was alive, but and didn't die. But I will tell you something. Like I said, this theory was not born of whole cloth, and I'll tell you my opinion, which has changed, by the way. I'll tell you my opinion later on in the video. But the background is, and there's the guys making noise, the guys and girls. It all to me, the final slide traces back to 1972. Absolutely. And you don't have to believe me, I have never, to this day, and I've devoured a lot of information on Elvis. Not Elvis the music, the records, Elvis the performer. Yes, that too. But Elvis the man is one of the most fascinating men in history. A man who had everything and was, especially the last several years of his life, for the most part, an absolutely miserable, unhappy human being who could have benefited from a lot of different things, but a lot of different, like therapy, like taking care of his health and weight, like getting off drugs, like either staying with Linda Thompson or finding a woman close to his age that he was comfortable with, that took care of him, but didn't baby him, his equal, which in a fantasy, because he never would have tolerated that, but someone he could love and would love him, not to replace his mother or be a sex object, but a good woman to stand with him, at his side, by his side, like Anne Margaret. But Anne Margaret was too independent and feisty and famous for him. But if he could have compromised on that. But anyway, I didn't do a video to talk about what would have saved Elvis, but those things I believe would have saved Elvis. He absolutely had to get off the drugs, the pills. He absolutely had to lose weight, and he also needed to get rid of Colonel Parker. and start traveling overseas and doing projects that interested him, because his depression was palpable, and a lot of it was because he was simply bored. In 1972, when Priscilla left Elvis, I believe that was the final slide, and it was the final slide emotionally. And it was also when he started gaining weight, and that weight basically continued to get worse, the weight gain, until his death, possibly his death, in 1977. Now, Elvis, I do believe, no matter what conclusion you come to, that I do absolutely believe that Elvis flirted, for lack of a better term, with the idea of faking his death, because he talked about it to the guys. By the way, I've never seen, did I already say this? That's how tired I am. No, I've never seen a documentary, like I say, on the man, not the performer, but the man. I've never seen a documentary, a film, being fiction or otherwise, or nonfiction, a concert, documentary, a book, that is as accurate as what you will hear from the so-called Memphis Mafia. Whatever you may think of them, these guys were not paid friends. They were not paid sycophants. And if you know anything about Elvis, the guy who was with him the most the last year of his life was his cousin, his first cousin, Billy Smith, who has his own YouTube channel today with his wife, Jo. God bless them both. And I mean, Billy and Joe were with Elvis the day he died. They were playing racquetball with his then girlfriend, Ginger Alden, and Elvis, just the four of them. And my point is, if you don't even believe the other guys, Lamar Fike, Marty Lacker, sometimes Joe Esposito, but Sonny and Red West, who also wrote a book, I do believe them. But if you don't believe them, everything they say is echoed by Billy Smith, his first cousin, who Elvis loved. Billy loved him. He had no reason. He talks glowingly about Elvis to this day. Elvis wanted him around because he was family, especially, like I said, that last year there were times when Billy was with Elvis 24 hours a day. So maybe not 24 hours, maybe 18 hours a day, but 7 days a week. He had conversations with him, Billy did, that no one did. Billy knows he's the Rosetta Stone of Elvis. He knows everything, and he was there, but he was quite a bit younger. So he knows the later Elvis. He knows Elvis from, mostly the mid-70s on, and those are the crucial years. So anyway, many of my sources come from Billy and Lamar Fike and the other guys who absolutely loved Elvis. Yes, they devoted their lives to him. They took pills like he did. They slept during the day and were awake at night like he did. They did everything because they loved him, because they admired him, because he was ostensibly their employer, even though they didn't make much money. They were his world, and their worlds were shattered when he died, if he died. I'll say it again. Okay. So, wow, isn't that nice fire? So, according to Billy and the other guys, Elvis did flirt with the idea in his final years. He said, I'm tired of this, and I'm paraphrasing. I'm tired of this life. I want to get away. I don't want to be Elvis anymore. I could do it. I could make it happen. I have the resources. And according to Lamar Fike, a guy actually called Gracelander, spoke to Lamar anonymously and said that this guy had been in contact with Elvis. This guy was terminally ill. Elvis was going to take care of this guy's family financially, and he was going to basically switch places with Elvis and go into the casket and pretend to be dead Elvis in a casket while Elvis was spirited away from Graceland on a helicopter. Now, the guy called again. He asked Lamar never found out who it was and didn't put much stock in it. But these little conversations, these little things that were happening were kind of weird and were kind of morbid. So, yes, I believe Elvis was flirting with the idea of it, but was he serious about it? Now, he also flirted with the idea of killing Mike Stone. Mike Stone. Priscilla's boyfriend, who she ostensibly left Elvis for in 1972. Now, in 1973, there was an incident in Las Vegas where Elvis was approached by a couple guys from the audience, and this is pretty well documented. In fact, you can find at least the audio on YouTube where Elvis basically says, after the guys are whisked off stage by the bodyguards, I mean the Memphis Mafia, the guys, but I'll just call them the guys. The guys got him off stage. Elvis said, I could have whipped his ass. They should have let me at him. Elvis was in his karate stance. But Elvis whipped himself into a frenzy just that very night after the concert, believing that these were, as the guys said, Hawaiian karate killers employed by Mike Stone to kill Elvis, which was, ridiculous. But that's the state of paranoia Elvis was in because of his impending divorce and because of, I believe, the drugs, in particular the downers, that were making him so paranoid. But he believed it. So, the opening scene in Red Sonny and Dave Hebler's book, which most of the fans hate that they wrote this book, which came out about 6 weeks before Elvis died. Or did he die? It's called Elvis What Happened. Tells the story of Elvis crying and screaming and literally, and Linda freaking out, Linda Thompson, and Elvis putting an M16 in Sonny West's hands and saying, "You're trying to hypnotize him. Look in my eyes, Sonny. Look in my eyes. You've got to do this. You have to kill Mike Stone. Kill Mike Stone for me. He's brought so much. He broke up my family, my marriage, Lisa's got no parents now, no married parents anyway, Lisa Marie. And of course, Sonny rejected it. And they said that Elvis was literally trying to get a toehold climbing the walls. Now, he was stoned out of his gourd while he was doing this, but he stuck with that idea for a few days. Linda and the guys had to eventually call in a doctor, give him a sedative. And a couple days went by, and the mafia apparently ordered to do the hit. He talked for a discount. I've heard it either a discount or for free because they were so, because they respected and admired Elvis so much. I heard that Elvis even talked to Frank Sinatra about it, who said, anything you need. That Elvis was prepared to do it, and that Sonny West had gotten in contact with a, hitman, and basically Elvis called it off because that wasn't who Elvis was. So again, I believe he flirted with the idea of killing Mike Stone, and I believe he also flirted with the idea of faking his death. But there are many arguments against it. Now let's talk about why. Well, one of the arguments against it was it's kind of a crazy thing to do. It's also illegal. He'd also lose all the fame and notoriety that he had. I mean, Joe DiMaggio wanted Marilyn to move up to San Francisco with him and be a housewife. I mean, that would never happen. She said, as miserable as she was at times, she could never just be a sort of a housefrau. How could she give up that fame and notoriety? And Elvis was the same way. In fact, one of the guys said that during the talk about wanting to get away from it all, quote unquote, get away from it all, including possibly faking his death, that Elvis went out the gate one day at Graceland. Nobody recognized him, surprisingly. And he said, turn around, I think I forgot something. Well, he didn't forget anything. They said he just wanted to go back again through the gate, in and then out again, waving. And the second time, he made extra efforts to wave and smile. And people, oh, it's Elvis. And they went crazy, and he was happy. And the guys in the car with him said, yeah, you really want to get away from it, don't you? And basically it was F you from Elvis. Meaning that I don't think Elvis ever could have literally lived without the fame that he had known since he was, 20 years old? 22 years old? So Elvis made comments like that, like wanting to get away from it all. He told, I believe, the Sweet Inspirations, the ladies who sang with him on stage in the 70s, I may not look good today, but I'll look good in my coffin. And then there were, obviously, I don't know where these supposed sightings came of Elvis, I guess that's kind of a sign of mass hysteria, Burger King sightings, and evidently he was enamored with, with, with Michigan and would move to Michigan. the spelling on the gravestone is wrong with Elvis Aaron Presley. So people were saying it was kind of a Paul is dead thing, that he misspelled the gravestone purposely because he knew he wasn't really there. You know, if you look at the photo that was taken apparently by the National Enquirer surreptitiously and published, it looks absolutely nothing like Elvis in the coffin. I mean, he looks 30 years old or 25 years old. They said the weight of the coffin was so heavy. One of the theories was that there was an air conditioner to keep the wax dummy in there. Another relative, Gene Smith, who does not have an ounce of credibility compared to Billy Smith, not even close, but he is a relative. He said that Elvis's hands in the coffin were not rough from karate and that the nose looked wrong. Then again, if you're faking your death, why would you do an open casket as they did? You know, risking exposure. It'd have to be somebody or some wax dummy that looked really, really close to the real Elvis. But that being said, these all came out afterwards because people didn't know about these comments. I think they just started seeing the sightings. And then Gail Giorgio received a call, which she taped from a guy who, to me, sounded absolutely, totally 100% like Elvis. But the guy later appeared on the Geraldo Show using that same voice, said it was me. Meaning it was this Elvis impersonator, speaking impersonator. But the language he used and the colloquialisms he used sounded exactly like Elvis, like Sleepy Elvis. Now, like I said, afterwards it did come out that, again, Elvis did flirt with the idea of doing this. He talked about wanting to get away from it all. He talked about wanting to get off the pills, or as he called it, his medication. He really needed a do-over, to start over. Another reason Elvis was so unhappy in the end is that I think he foolishly let Linda Thompson go, and the girl he was with, Ginger Alden, according to the guys, did not love him, did not even like him. Linda went on all the tours, was always by his side for 5 years, and Ginger did not want to go. Ginger didn't even want to spend the night or live at Graceland. So it was, Elvis was in the midst of an unhappy personal relationship. His career was in decline. His health was in serious decline. His drug addiction, particularly to downers, Demerol, Percodan. I'm trying to think of the drug that they give to very ill cancer patients. I mean, he was taking a lot of stuff, just like Michael Jackson, that he really should not have been. And he was addicted. And he said, it's my medication and I need it, which was, you know, what the addicts will say. And he also had physical problems, twisted colon, glaucoma, enlarged heart, diabetes, high blood pressure. Elvis was not at all in a good place, emotionally or financially for that matter. He was tired of the Colonel. Colonel was tired of him. That's why he was booking him in these small venues throughout the United States. It was a situation that wasn't going to get better unless Elvis really surrendered himself to healing himself mentally and psychologically. And like I said before, I don't think he would have done that. He was too macho or proud. He wouldn't even see a therapist. And prayer wasn't doing it for him. Plus the loss of his mother, which he certainly never got over. The divorce from Priscilla, really what he viewed as the treachery of Priscilla. I know that's the pot calling the kettle black when it comes to infidelity, but I don't think he ever thought that Priscilla would abandon him and leave him for another man. I mean, he's Elvis Presley. Who leaves Elvis Presley for another man? What man stacks up in Elvis's mind, you know, his ego? And I do believe that he thought about ways of getting away from it all. A couple more things that happened that would make us suspect. Elvis, as you know, or you may not know, was a wannabe police officer or law enforcement. I mean, he personally went to Nixon. He wrote Nixon a letter while Nixon was president asking to be appointed as with a special title. And he actually was invited in to see Nixon. he and Sonny West was with him, and he wanted an honorary badge. Elvis wanted to be law enforcement. He believed in the sort of, his mentality was what used to be called the white hats and the black hats, meaning the good guys versus bad guys. Elvis specifically said he wanted to go, ironically, he wanted to help with the war on drugs, and he wanted to be a warrior against drugs. Now, Elvis, as I said, called it my medication. He did not consider himself a drug user or drug abuser. All his narcotics, which were pills, were dispensed by physicians, especially Dr. Nicopolis, who later lost his license. But not just Dr. Nick, other docs too. Elvis didn't do cocaine, he didn't do marijuana, he didn't really drink, he didn't do illegal substances, he didn't, like I said, and if you talk to him, he never said to anybody, well, I can't wait to get blasted tonight, I can't wait to get high. His intention, the way he justified it was, I need this medication, I need to wake up, I need to sleep, I need to, kill the pain that afflicts me, so on and so forth. So Elvis was up for dangerous situations. He'd even pull people over sometimes, particularly in Memphis. He'd had a blue light he'd put up on his car. He had a flashlight he'd carry around. He'd pull people over, pretending he was the police, that nobody would recognize him. I mean, he really had a fantasy, especially in the last 5 years of his life when he was in serious psychological and physical decline, that he could be an officer of the law. It really, really excited him. He really wanted to get the bad guys. And there were FBI files that said that Elvis's sort of self-directed war on drug dealers and the drug cartel, not cartel, but situation, may have put Elvis's life in danger. He also was in the process of selling an airplane of his, and the guy named Frederick Peter Pro was apparently, there's an FBI file on him too. It looks like Elvis might have been doing business with organized crime members without Elvis's knowledge. Not necessarily, Italian mob, but organized crime in general. And I absolutely believe that the combination of what he believes undercover in his law enforcement activities against, in particular, drug dealers and the drug suppliers, and combined with the business dealings, trying to sell that plane for $1 million, and unwittingly getting involved possibly with organized crime, I do believe that there were credible threats, or that the perception was that Elvis was being warned that he maybe should disappear for a while, that Lisa was certainly in danger. There was also a ring that evidently this ring might have threatened Sean Lennon. If you read the books about John and Yoko, apparently there was a ring that was going around, or when I say a ring, I mean a group of thieves that were either threatening to or kidnapping children of celebrities, and then of course blackmailing them for the ransom money. And it's purported that Elvis was worried about Lisa Marie. And she was at Gracelander a lot. I mean, the guys were there, but there wasn't professional security there, and there certainly wasn't security that I know of out here in California around Priscilla and Mike Stone when they would have custody, or when Priscilla would have custody of Lisa. So I do believe Elvis was scared at the time. I do believe the guys around Elvis and the family were frightened for Elvis at the time. I don't think he laughed it off, because Elvis also, beginning with in his early 20s with his celebrity, routinely received, not routinely, but he definitely received death threats, which I believe made him study karate. He learned some self-defense in the Army, but if Elvis had worked at a gas station in his life, I don't believe for a solitary second he would have learned karate, and he would have become so enamored with guns and become the obsessed guy with guns that he became. If not, there were threats on his life. There were threats to kill him in the 70s on stage. There were times when the guys were, I do firmly believe this, were prepared to take a bullet for Elvis. They would block him on stage, in particular Red and Sonny West, the cousins. So Elvis, what I'm saying to you is that Elvis was involved in this web of danger, particularly in the last couple of years, because of his work, or perceived work, with the Drug Enforcement Agency, with the DEA, and because of these business deals, and particularly the airplane deal with Frederick Peter Pro, who you can research on your own. There was shady stuff going on, unbeknownst to Elvis. I mean, what I'm saying is Elvis was not trying to put himself in danger, obviously, or his family. Certainly not Lisa Marie, the person he probably cared about most in the world. But shady things were happening, and I think this led to an aura of him saying to the guys, maybe I should just blow. Maybe I should just go in the wind. Maybe I should disappear for a while. I think that Elvis was conflicted, and I think he did kind of go back and forth with, maybe I should disappear for a while. No, I can't. I'm still famous. Maybe I should. Maybe I shouldn't. And I think that as these bits of information got reported in books and things afterwards, in particular by Gail Brewer Giorgio, who did a good job. She did a good job with all these things, showing the potential danger that was coming into Elvis's life, the last year or two of his life, maybe. I think these all coalesced into people picking up bits and pieces and saying, you know what, Elvis was in a dangerous place, and ergo, I think it's possible he faked his death. That combined with the things like how he looked in his casket, how it didn't look like him, the weight of the casket, saying, you're saying, I may not look good tonight, but I'll look good in my casket. Things of that nature. Things that I had already mentioned, one that I can't recall right now, but making it look like Elvis was, on his way out. So, I guess now I'll tell you what I think. For a while, I did read both Gail's books. I saw the documentaries and I heard the tape. And for a while I thought, you know what? This is actually possible. I remember my girlfriend at the time, very logical, highly educated woman, and she said the exact same thing. She said, I know it's crazy, but when you read all the evidence or the theories, I believed it was possible. I believed maybe the danger to his life was such, and Lisa's, and he didn't want to, be a has-been from his 40s till his end days, drug addicted. Oh, there's one more thing I got to mention before the end here. Red and Sonny West had been fired ostensibly by Vernon Presley, which was, I believe, a huge mistake. Now, Elvis would go through rages all those last years, starting in the 60s, starting after his mother died and after he came back from the army. The two things that really, 50% of him was destroyed by those two incidents. The next 50% was when Priscilla left him. But he was routinely firing guys. You're fired, you're fired, you're fired. I'm firing your ass. He even fired Vernon, his father, once, coming down the steps at Graceland. He fired his doctor, Dr. Nick. And Laura said, how do you fire a doctor? So Elvis was fire happy, and then he'd always take the guys back. But in 1976, he fired Red, and, well, he couldn't do it. He had Vernon tell them, actually, Colonel told them that Red and Sonny and Dave Hebler, who had not been on the scene very long, were fired. And Red saved him in the bathroom at Humes High, his cousin Red, in the 50s when guys were going to cut, this is documented in at least the Kurt Russell Elvis film, guys were going to cut Elvis's hair. They said, you look like a squirrel, boy. And they were going to cut his hair off and possibly beat him up. And Red came in to the bathroom, who was a football player, and he said, if you touch my cousin's hair, if you touch my cousin, you got to touch me. If you want to cut his hair, you got to cut mine. The guys were intimidated, and they left him alone. I mean, and Red and Sonny were with him, like I said, from the beginning. You couldn't have been more close. The only guy he was closer with, like I say, was Billy Smith, his other cousin. But, Did I say that they were cousins? That they were cousins. They were not Elvis's cousin. But Red and Sonny were very, very close and would have given their lives, I really strongly believe, for Elvis. And they were fired. And there's a tape out there, you can hear it on YouTube, of Elvis talking about the book that subsequently, they were so upset, Red, Sonny, by the betrayal of being fired after 20 years, and their deep friendship and living at Graceland and the marriages and going through everything they went through with Elvis, that they wrote a story that was going to be in the National Enquirer, and then they got a book deal out of it. And they wrote a book called Elvis, What Happened. Now, the timing was terrible. It came out 6 weeks before Elvis died, and Elvis was absolutely shattered by it. He swore he wouldn't read it. Billy told him he had read excerpts of it, and he says, well, what does it say? And Billy said, well, it says you're, a drug addict and an asshole. And Elvis apparently was petrified. He was petrified that he would lose his fans. He was petrified what Lisa would think. In fact, supposedly he went out in L.A. on one of his rampages again and said he was going to go kill Sonny West. And the guy in the car with him, and I don't remember it was Jerry Schilling or Sonny, the guy said, better Lisa thinks you're a drug addict than a killer. And supposedly Elvis slammed the brakes and just started sobbing. He could not stomach the idea of his fans and his, he was obviously very embarrassed. And he was going on stage talking about being strung out. So, added incentive to want to maybe disappear from the world. Everything was coming apart. It was coming apart at the seams really, really quickly. It was something was going to give in the summer of 77, or by fall, or by early next year. It could not continue this way. So at the beginning, like I said, after some investigation, I thought it was possible. After reading this particular book that I read with the so-called Memphis Mafia, the guys who were with him almost every day for over 20 years, so folks, no one knew him better than these guys, and their stories are consistent because each interview has the name of the guy speaking before the interview, and you can see what they're saying, and these stories are consistent. You can see them interviewed too, and YouTube has interviews with the guys. After seeing what they said and how they talk about in detail what happened to Elvis, I do believe Elvis did in fact die on August 16th, 1977. In fact, Billy tells it really specifically, and involving also the guys that were there that day. Rick Stanley and David Stanley, Elvis's stepbrothers or former stepbrothers. After Gladys died, Vernon married a woman named Dee Stanley. They had been divorced, but Elvis had brought Dee's sons, who were in their 20s at that time, into the fold, and drugs were rampant with the Stanley guys too. I think that's another reason Elvis wanted them around, because they were druggies too at the time. Anyway, but the story they told is how Elvis took 3 doses of his medication that day, or through the night. Elvis slept during the day and was awake at night, but that sometime in the morning or early afternoon he couldn't sleep and went into the bathroom, took his medication, which they called the TAC packs, the TAC pack 1, the TAC pack 2 and 3, and Billy said that he saw Elvis take the ones earlier. He wasn't there for the last one, but Billy said that among other things, well, let me back up and say that Lamar Fike said that Elvis hadn't eaten anything for hours. He probably took too much of that stuff on an empty stomach and just realized, keeled over. He also had codeine that he had gotten from the dentist the night before. He might have had an anaphylactic shock, codeine reaction. Billy swears that he was there. He came to Graceland and said, has anybody seen Elvis sometime in the early afternoon? They said he's upstairs, presumably sleeping with Ginger. And Billy said he went halfway up the stairs and then turned around. And he said, no, I'll let him sleep. And he regrets it to this day. And he Might have been able to save him, but the doctors told him he was probably already dead. I do believe Elvis died that day. I don't think he could keep up a hoax and the anonymity of faking his death all these years. And I don't believe Billy would lie. I mean, yes, he'd have to protect Elvis and Elvis's memory, but I think Elvis would have surfaced by now, especially with the internet and internet sleuths. So anyway, that's what I think, folks. I think, unfortunately, Elvis did die that day, but I can certainly see why people think he might have faked his death with all those things I talked about, including the fact that I thought it for a long time, until I heard these guys, and these guys are very convincing to me. They, like I said, they knew him for over 20 years, or were with him almost every day and night for 20 years. They were loyal to him, they loved him, and they told consistent stories. So I believe he did die that day, but I can see why people would think otherwise and want to think otherwise, want to hope otherwise. All right, guys, long video, Ron here. If you like the channel, please subscribe. If you do subscribe, please hit the little bell icon next to the subscription button, and you'll know when I post. Please give the channel likes, very important, and I'll see you guys at the next location. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.